Alright guys, so in this video we're going to still work with Ajax and XHR, but I also want to work with JSON data, okay, instead of just plain text. So in the index.html here, we're using skeleton CSS, I have a container, we have two buttons, one is to get customer, one is to get customers. They both have different IDs, button 1, button 2, and then down here we have a div with the ID of customer, and then a div with the ID of customers. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to have two JSON files. One is going to be just a single customer, and then one is going to be an array of customer objects. Okay, so let's go ahead and create those files first. This data.txt shouldn't even be here. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And then let's create a new file called customer.js. Or I'm sorry, customer.json. And JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And like I said, it's very, very similar to your standard JavaScript object. So let's go ahead and put in some curly braces here, just like we would with an object. Now, with an object literal, we would put like ID, we could say ID whatever, well, it would probably be a number, so ID 1, and then we could put name John Doe, something like that. Now notice how this is red. That's because we have some errors in our syntax. Now with JSON, like I said in the last video, the difference is that you need to wrap your keys and your values in semicolons. In double quotes. Unless of course it's a number, then you don't have to. So our keys need to be wrapped like that. See how it's not red anymore? Let's go like that, and then our strings should also be wrapped in double quotes. So now this should be valid JSON. All right, and if you ever want to validate your JSON, there's plenty of online tools to do that. So let's go to jasonlint.com, and let's actually backtrack for a minute here and put in what I had before. And let's say validate JSON. And you can see that we're getting an error here. All right, now if we go back and put in our valid syntax and put this in here and validate, you can see that this is valid JSON. So you can use tools like this to check to see if it's valid. All right, so let's do name. Let's do, we'll say company. We'll say he works at 123 Designs. And then phone. Okay, so there's our customer. So we'll save that. And now let's go back into, let's go into app.js. And from here, we're going to create an event listener for button 1, which is get customer. So let's say document dot get element by ID, and we want button 1. We want to create an event listener for a click, and then we're going to call load customer. All right, we'll go down here, we'll say function load customer, and we'll pass in our event object. Now in here we're going to do what we did in the last video. We're going to create an XHR request. So we're going to say XHR equals new XML HTTP request. Okay, so that instantiates it. Now we want to call our open. So at XHR.open. Again, we're making a GET request. And this time we're making it to customer.js. I'm sorry, .json. All right, and then true for asynchronous. And then let's see, we want to have our send down at the bottom, so xhr.send. Oh, and then in here we'll put our onload. Okay, let's check to make sure that it's a 200 status. If it is, then we can proceed to do whatever we want with the response. So let's just log it for now. We'll say this dot response text and save. And now let's click get customer, and you can see it's now logging that JSON response. All right, so instead of just putting it down here, let's actually output it into that div. So we'll go ahead and comment that out. And we need to, first of all, parse this as JSON. I'm sorry, parse it as an object. So we're going to say const, let's say const customer equals, and we're going to say JSON.parse this dot response text. The reason we're doing this is because this is basically a JSON string. We're not going to be able to get, for instance, customer.id or customer.name unless we run it through this JSON parse. So that's why we're doing that. Okay, and then from here, let's go ahead and create a variable called output, and we'll set it to a template literal, and we'll put some HTML in here. So we'll put a UL and then inside here we'll say ID user.id, and let's see, we'll put, what else was it, name, copy this. So we had name, we had company, and we had phone. Okay, so now we have this in a variable. Now we want to output it into the browser. So let's say document.get element by ID, and let's get the ID of customer, and let's say dot inner HTML equals output. All right, so let's save. Let's click get customer. User is, oh, you know what? This should be customer, not user. Sorry, guys. Because we're referring to this here. All right, let's try it again. Get customer, and there we go. So now that data from that JSON file, we're getting it asynchronously through the XHR object, and then we're outputting it in the browser. All right, now it works the same way if you were fetching this from an external URL, from a public API or something like that. Like, let's say you were getting the GitHub users from their API. It would work very similar. In this case, we're just getting it from a local file. All right, now what I want to do is kind of the same thing, except I want to fetch an array of customers and output them here. Okay, so let's create a new file called customers plural.json, and then in here we can have an array. So we want our brackets, and then we want our JSON objects. Actually, I'll just copy this customer here, and then we'll just go ahead and paste that in, put a comma. So we'll do 3 of them. So we'll do ID 2, 3. Let's change the names up a little bit. Company, we'll say, I don't know, Hello Productions. So this one will say Tara Williams, and we'll just say she works at Traversy Media, the best company in the world. All right, so now we have an array of JSON objects. So let's go back to app.js and let's create a new event listener. I'm going to copy this one here, and we're going to listen on button 2, and we want to call load customers this time. Okay, now I'm going to copy load customer because it's going to be kind of similar, so we'll copy that. Let's actually put a comment here. We'll say load customers and for load customers we're going to instantiate our XHR object. We want to make a get request to customers.json this time. Alright, and then on load we're going to check for the status, and then we want to set const customers equal to json.parse response text. Now since we have an array, we can't just output it like we did up there. We need to loop through it. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say customers dot for each, and then pass in a function here with customer, and let's actually instantiate or initialize a variable here with let called output. All right, we're going to set it to nothing. Now I'm using let because I'm going to actually reassign this inside of the loop. All right, now inside the loop I'm going to grab this and we're going to paste that in here, and we're going to change this. We're going to get rid of the const, okay, because we're using this output, and we're going to append. So we're going to use plus equals instead of equals. If we equals, we're going to overwrite this, but we want to append onto this, and then each iteration it'll append that new customer onto output. All right, now we have to change this down here. Actually, no, we don't. That should be fine. That should be fine. So then we'll go under the for each loop, and let's say get element by ID customers, which is this right here. And now when we call this load customers, I forgot to add the S. When we call load customers, it should output all of these customers. So let's try this. Let's save it. Let's click get customers. Okay, looks like we have an error. Unexpected token in JSON at 348. Let me see. Customers JSON.parse. Let me take a look at the customers file. ID, name, company, phone. Oh, we're missing a curly brace. All right, let's try it again. And there we go. So now we're looping through all the customers and outputting each one in its own UL. Okay, and we can still get that single customer from that file as well. All right, so hopefully this little exercise gave you an idea of how we can use JSON, how we can fetch it, how we can output it, loop through it. I mean, you guys already knew how to do this for each stuff. We already went over that plenty of times. But it gives you an idea of how we can work with APIs, even though this is just a local file. So in the next video, what I want to do is kind of the same thing, but I want to work with an outside public API and bring some data in.